Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Amanda Beatty, and I am our marketing manager here at DCI. And I have the pleasure of introducing today's webinar topic, OFCCP Contractor Portal and AAP Verification, Updates and Considerations. Next slide, please. On today's webinar, participant phone lines are muted. If you have any questions, please feel free to submit them at news@dciconsult.com. If you have any technical difficulties, please send an email to that address as well, and we will help you as soon as possible. Next slide, please. The information in this PowerPoint is provided for general information purposes only, and these materials are not intended to provide legal advice. These copyrighted materials may not be reproduced, copied, or used without prior permission from the authors. Next slide, please. If you are new to joining us here at DCI, welcome. We are a data-driven, client-focused HR data analytics firm. Our mission is advancing workforce equity and organizational effectiveness through our dynamic client partnerships. And our vision is that we believe every person deserves equal opportunity and fair treatment in the workplace and beyond. We do that through a variety of different service offerings. Next slide, please. OFCCP compliance is a big service offering here at DCI Consulting. You will hear about that in relation today to the OFCCP Contractor Portal. We also offer diversity, equity, and inclusion services, pay equity, personnel selection, EEO litigation support, and testing and validation services. If you'd like to speak with us about any of these offerings, please feel free to fill out a contact form on our website. Next slide, please. And we just wanted to highlight a few resources here. You're taking advantage today of our monthly webinar. We offer that the second Wednesday of every month. It's complimentary, so we really encourage you to join us. Feel free to take a look at all of the webinars listed for 2022 on our website. Clients have access to these recordings in our client resource portal. You can see previous webinars that we've done, as well as lots of checklists, guides, and other useful information. Additionally, we have a free blog where we send out alerts and regulatory updates. So please subscribe at our blog on our website. Next slide. And finally, we wanted to highlight some resources specific to the contractor portal. If you haven't taken advantage yet, OFCCPcertification.com is a free DCI resource where you can fill out a few questions and it will direct you to the regulations that apply to your organization and provide recommendations on next steps. Additionally, we have lots of resources and content available specific to the contractor portal. So we really encourage you to go to dciconsult.com/contractor portal service to take advantage of all these free resources. We will be sending out an email at the end of this webinar with these direct links. Next slide. And now I have the pleasure of introducing today's fabulous speakers. Amanda Bowman is our Director of Audit Strategy and Regulatory Affairs, and Rosemary Cox is an Associate Principal Consultant. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Amanda, for the great intro. All right, let's go ahead and get into the content because we certainly have a lot to talk about, and we're actually going to go a little bit past that 30-minute typical schedule for these webinars and go a little bit further. If you don't have more time beyond 30 minutes, that's okay. We'll be making the available recording for everyone rather than just clients. So be on the lookout for that as well. But okay, our big topics for today, like I said, we have a lot to cover. We want to do a little bit of background information, just to remind everyone why the contractor portal now exists, as well as the certification requirement. Walk you through what we know so far about the registration process, as well as your user options and setup. Spend a few minutes chatting about what we know so far about certification and what we still hope to learn. Got a few important considerations, of course, for you all for this process, and then we'll do just a quick recap of some DCI resources. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Rosemary if you want to go ahead and kick us off with some background information.
Great. We're just going to talk a little bit, just to kind of level set, make sure that everybody knows why we're doing this. So the OFCCP Contractor Portal it's web-based. They've actually put a lot of security on it. We were really pleased to hear that the other day. There was a lot of concern around whether it was going to be secure, and if we were uploading things, would it be really a secure site for you? It is, so that's very good. It's going to require you to log in every year and certify that you're in compliance with the regulations. It's a little bit more than just have you written your affirmative action plans? Do you have that paper document? It really is, are you doing all of the pieces to comply with an affirmative action program? You will have to upload only in the event of an audit your affirmative action plan that is under audit. And that's actually a really good thing. It might be a little bit scary at first, but it's really a good thing because right now you may have been in a situation where you emailed your information to the OFCCP and then they wrote back and said, gosh, we didn't get your information. Can you resend it? So that will cut back on all of that. So the portal is going to be a really good thing, we believe. So way back in 2016, the Government Accountability Office, or GAO, did a study, and on their report, they had three major concerns that they wanted addressed by the OFCCP. The first one was that they were concerned that about 85% of contractors were not submitting their AAPs in time when they got an audit notice. So they were submitting things late, they were piecemealing things, and so they kind of came to the conclusion that maybe the AAPs weren't even done. So that was a concern, and they want to make sure that people are submitting their documents in a timely manner. The next thing was that the GAO was asking the OFCCP about how many contractors do we have? Who's a contractor? Does everybody have an AAP? And there was really no system in place for them to say, yep, we've checked it off and all these people have their AAPs. So they asked the OFCCP to come up with some sort of a mechanism to monitor this. So a checklist, something electronic that they can say, yep, we've got, 200,000 contractors and all 200,000 have certified. So that's kind of how the contractor portal was born. In 2018, they came out with a directive, and the directive said that they were going to establish this program to verify compliance. So that's the portal. They are going to they're going to look at the certifications every year, and they're going to follow up by doing some compliance checks possibly. So one of the things that you'll be doing is when you certify is you're certifying under penalty of perjury that you have your AAPs in place in the program and are actively working on the programs. So they just want to follow up. So if you check that button, you might get a compliance check to kind of prove that you have done that. The third bullet is a little bit different now, but could change eventually. It says, may it eventually involve annual submission of the AAP for OFCCP review. So there is a part in the regulations that is already there to submit your AAPs annually. They've never done that, and they are certainly not doing that right now in this portal. So that is not effective right now. But I think they put that in there just in case they would like to go that direction in the future. Certification will be a factor in selecting contractors for compliance evaluations. They come up with a methodology on how people get on that, the CSAL list, and the fact that if you did or did not certify will now be included in that methodology.
Yep, and Rosemary, I tell you, to your point, I think it's important to keep in mind this is the directive that kind of started what we're going to talk about for the rest of today, but their OFCCP isn't necessarily implementing every single one of these things just yet. But I think it's really good for folks to keep this directive in mind because I think it gives a window of to where this initiative could be going.
Absolutely. So who's going to use the portal? This is kind of interesting. So primarily it's going to be supply and service contractors. So you've got to meet the jurisdictional threshold. Excuse me. So, hold contracts of over $50,000 or more, have more than 50 people in your organization, then you're going to be complying with Executive Order 11246 and Section 503. If you have a contract of over $150,000 or more and have those 50 employees, you will be complying with the VEVRA portion of the regulations as well. So this is going to include universities, those who do establishment affirmative action plans, those that do functional affirmative action plans, financial institutions, etc. So the kind of the caveat here is construction contractors are not going to be using the portal unless you have a split organization. So you have some supply and service contracts and you're a construction contractor. In that case, you would only be using the portal for the sales and service portion of your business. And we'll talk more about that in just a few minutes.
All right, so let's go ahead and get into the actual portal and what we know so far. So hopefully folks are familiar with the timeline and are keeping their eye on this. So we have passed kind of the registration opening, and happy to say that OFCCP opened up registration on time on February 1st, 2022, and they actually hosted a webinar that same day and kind of opened the portal, or really opened the registration, I should say, kind of right when that webinar was kicking off. So a lot of what we've learned came from that webinar, as well as some additional resources that we'll talk about throughout, like a user guide or FAQs. And so that was a really informative webinar. Hopefully they'll be posting that for the public as well. But we'll refer back to that throughout. Then you have several months to complete your registration process, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. But come March 31st, you will also have the ability to access kind of an additional portion of the portal when you can actually go in and start certifying that your affirmative action programs are in compliance. You can certainly continue to register past March 31st. It's not like they will take that option away from you all, but they're kind of giving this additional period, I think probably to work out some kinks, since this is the first year to allow for that registration. And then you'll have between March 31st and then June 30th to complete your certification for this year. OFCCP did share, though, on the webinar, it's not like the portal will just shut down June 30th. That there will be the option to certify beyond that, but really the intention there is for kind of newer contractors that are still within their 120 days to kind of get their plans and program in place. There will be an option to certify beyond that. I'm sure they'll be releasing some additional information to go along with that as well. Okay, so kind of a high level step to registration, and then we actually have some great screenshots and scenarios that we're going to walk through as well. So hopefully this, you've got a lot of that backup information to go along with this slide and the next one. But essentially the very first step is that you need to kind of set up your accounts or possibly accounts, either account or accounts. And so the very first thing you'll need to do is have a login.gov account. Now, some of you may already have this, which is in case you've kind of already checked that box, and you'll be able to enter that information and then move forward with your second account, which is for the actual contractor portal. And if you don't have a login.gov account, that's okay. It doesn't take too long to set up. And there's even an option through the portal website to set it up. It'll kind of redirect you to login.gov, start populating that information, and then move right into the portal setup as well. And the login.gov does include some two-factor authentication, so you'll be setting that up as well and need to be prepared for that piece of it. But again, they've worked in some security measures through utilizing that login.gov. So next will come user authorization, and where you're really trying to gain access to the portal, and especially for this initial setup, you'll need to be kind of entering and then moving into step 3, confirming some information. Part of that user authorization, just to be aware, you'll need to be prepared with certain pieces of information, and then you'll also need to be prepared to agree to a set kind of terms or rules of behavior. We'll touch on all of that. You'll move into the parent company piece of it, especially for the initial users for accounts. And then you'll have the ability as kind of the initial user to then assign other users if you're interested. And just to be aware that users are notified immediately as soon as you assign them. There's no pressure to assign additional users immediately, so certainly you can take your time with that and be thoughtful. We have some considerations for you all.
I like that they've made it very easy for you. So it's one click inside the OFCCP portal, and then it directs you to the login.gov and then back. So you're not having to go out and do, go into different websites. So I like that they've been very thoughtful about that. So I like it.
Yeah, it was pretty seamless, actually. So I agree. Okay, and this next page, we won't spend too much time on it, but we really wanted to create this as a nice reference page for folks out there that will be moving forward with their registration and kind of company setup. It's a lot, certainly when you sit down to get it done, you want to make sure you have your hands on all the applicable information in order to move forward. So just make sure you have things like your federal tax ID number, EIN. One thing that we do want to point out, especially because some folks were running into this for companies that ran out there to register immediately. We're going to walk through this, but there is an option to utilize your 2018 EEO-1 filing. You can't use 2019 or 2020, and certainly not 2021. There just wasn't enough time since for those filings, and obviously 2021 has not happened yet. But there is kind of an option to utilize that information. So in order to do that, you'll have to have handy your EEO-1 kind of company number, then possibly establishment number. And OFCCP did come out with some new information indicating you only want to enter the first 6 digits of that EEO-1 information. So just be aware of that, because otherwise you will run into an error. And again, this is all tied to 2018. So if you didn't do your 2018 filing or there's some other applicable reasons, you won't be utilizing this information. And of course, there's other various pieces of parent company information you'll need to enter or have handy to verify. Okay, let's go ahead and jump in, and we'll point out all of these things as we move throughout the screens. The very first thing that you're going to see when you access the portal page, and we do have a link that'll kind of take you right to the page that'll take you here. So you have the option, if it's your very first time, you will click Create Account. If it's not, then you'll utilize this Sign In button to move into that portal information. As we mentioned, you will need to agree to rules of behavior, and every user, whether you're kind of the initial user that's signing the company up, or you're a user that is assigned after the fact, everyone will need to agree to these rules of behavior. We don't, obviously, as you can see, there's 14 items. We recommend reviewing this in full. Certainly, there wasn't anything that kind of jumped out of this too much or caused a concern. The only thing that we did want to point out is item 13 in here. OFCCP explicitly states and has you agree to the fact that if you no longer have a legitimate need to access the portal, maybe you terminate from your organization, your role changes, whatever it might be, you're agreeing that you will immediately request that your account is terminated by submitting a contractor portal technical help request form. So I thought that was interesting. It's really putting the onus on each of the individuals, not just like an admin user or corporate user for the company, but putting that onus on every individual that if they don't need access, they really should be reaching out and indicating that. And we'll refer back to this contractor portal technical help request form several times throughout the rest of this webinar, because there's quite a few things that you need to engage with OFCCP for some help on. And so I think you'll become intimately familiar with that form. OFCCP has indicated that you will hear back within a business day after submitting that information. They're kind of replying back with an auto notification indicating they'll get back to you quickly. So if that's the case, I think that will be very useful throughout the certification process as well as the registration process over the next couple of months. But certainly we'll keep our eye on that to see if those wait times become longer. Okay, so user authorization page. After the rules of behavior, everyone will come to this screen, and I think there's actually a lot to talk about here. So everyone that is kind of registering for their company and registering themselves will need to have available the employer identification number. So no matter what, you'll need that full EIN for the parent company. And OFCCP has advised that the company setup really should follow your EEO-1 setup. So this would essentially be the employer EIN that number essentially that you are using in your EEO-1 filing. So that should align with the parent company. If there's a situation where there's kind of multiple filings, for affiliated companies, there'll be multiple kind of portal companies set up. So really follow that that alignment of your EEO-1 filings. Now, if you want to, or you need to, and you're also able to import your 2018 EEO-1 information, and there's certainly some advantages to that. What you'll also need to do in addition to your EIN is enter the EEO-1 company number here, and you'll do that for your, it aligns with your headquarters as well as your overall company. That's one and the same. So you would enter that here. As well as, if you were kind of being authorized for a particular establishment, you'd enter that here, or you can just kind of duplicate the information up here as well. And this is the spot where you would only enter 6 digits. If there are 7 digits tied to your number, you just drop off the last digit. Make sure you only have 6 or it won't be recognized. But if you don't have that information available, maybe that was lost for whatever reason, or your company did not file 2018 reports, or maybe you're not required to file EEO-1 reports. So universities, for example, do not complete EEO-1 reports, so they would not have that information. You would check this box indicating that these identifiers, these last 2 identifiers, are not known. Again, no matter what, you have to enter that EIN, but if you don't have that EEO-1 information, it's not applicable, you would check this box. It says, I do not have the requested identifiers, et cetera. One thing we're going to talk a little bit about is that there are companies out there, there's contractors out there that did do 2018 EEO-1 reports, but they may not want to import their 2018 establishment information. And there's kind of various reasons that we'll touch on throughout. So we just want to note that there might be a reason that you have this information, but you still want to check this box and not enter that information to automatically bring in information from several years ago. Rosemary, anything you'd add to that?
Nope, I think you covered it.
All right, perfect. Well, then I'll kick it to you if you want to walk us through kind of what happens next, whether you check the box or not.
Okay, so we're going to kind of do this both ways. We're going to do as if we were a known identifier and as if we were not. So we didn't have any of that information, or we do FAPS, or we're a university, or we just don't want to input our EEO-1s. So if you're a known identifier, so you filled out all of the information on the user administration, the left side, you didn't check that little box, then it's going to pre-populate your parent information. So what you see on the screen, it's a little small, so we apologize for that. But it'll have your parent company name, and it's going to have your DUNS, your EIN. It's going to have all of the information that is coming from your parent company EEO-1. You will be able to edit all of the information on this screen except for your company ID, and that's going to pre-populate, and your EIN number. So those are the only 2 boxes that you cannot alter on this screen. So go ahead, you would give it once over. If you change the name of your company, maybe you've got limited now on the back of side of your company, you could change any of that here. You'll see at the bottom there's a company URL. So this is not a required field. That's going to be completely up to you whether you fill that out or not. Think about what it might be used for. We're not really sure what it might be used for. Is there a reason that maybe, you'd rather have them just go do a search and find your company? Whatever. It's completely up to you, but it is not a required field. So you decide internally whether you'd like to fill that out or not. So once you do that, then you're going to be taken to another page, and that's going to show you your headquarters, and it's going to show you all of your, basically your EEO-1 information listed below. It's pretty easy to work with. You're going to see on the right-hand side, there's an edit button. So whoever has admin rights will be able to go in and edit any of the information, again, except for the company number and the EIN number within any of these establishments. One thing that we did want to point out, however, is depending on what your EEO-1 reports look like, if you named all of your reports the same, so, you know, XYZ company, or in this case, Threads for Feds company, and then the only identifier on your EEO-1 reports is the address, you might want to make some changes, because unlike the EEO-1 portal, where you can see the address and information of each of your locations, you can't here. So if you named them all the same, then you may have 1,000 lines that all say Threads for Feds. So in this case, you can see one of them, they've changed it to Threads for Feds East, Threads for Feds North, Threads for, they did this on purpose to get me all tongue-tied. Threads for Feds South, etc., so that you can quickly look at all of those reports and assign users quickly. So if you don't know, you know, again, we're going to go over several reasons why you might want to check that box and not have your EEO-1s pre-populate. But let's say you're a university or you're doing FAPS, you might want to do that, and you'll get a blank page. So the first thing you're going to see is create a parent company. This does need to be your actual parent company. So what you would consider your parent company on your EEO-1 reports, you need to fill that in here. And again, you're just going to fill in all the information. You're going to see that it's going to assign you a company ID. You'll have your EIN number will already be populated, because remember, you're going to check the box and fill in your EIN number only on the main page. So those two things will be pre-populated. So it's all the same information that we saw previously. You're just going to have to manually fill it in. And again, you've got that your URL, whether you want to put that in or not. Now this page is a little bit different. So if you aren't going to have it pre-populating, this is kind of where that decision comes in that you need to make as an organization. And again, we'll give you the considerations, but we just need to think about it. So if I'm an organization and I have 500 establishments, do I really want to key in 500 establishments? Maybe, maybe not, depends on the circumstances. But there'll be a big add establishment button on the main page. You'll just click that button, it'll take you here. And again, here's where you want to be mindful of the company name. So put something in it that makes you know a north, south, east, you know, whatever it is, so that you can easily identify it. You're going to put the establishment information in. You're going to put in the DUNS number. You're going to assign a NAICS number. Again, you have all these on EEO-1s if you filled them out. If you're a university and you've not filled them out, you may need to do a little bit of research on what you might put on, for example, for the NAICS number. The EIN number is one thing that we want to point out here. If the EIN number is exactly the same as your parent company, you don't want to put that in there. If you put it in there, it's going to give you an error message, and it's going to tell you that it's already in use. So if it's the same, then just leave it blank. If it's different, that's when you would put that in there.
Yep. And then I just wanted to point out that there is also that employee head count that will need to be entered as well. It says it's required. We're not sure if you need to enter it exactly when you set it up, or if you could leave it blank and then go back and update that later. But wanted to point that out as well. And then address information.
So some good news for FAPs and universities. So if you have a FAP, you don't need to, in fact, I'd probably tell you not to, but you don't need to import your 2018 report. I think it'd be really confusing to have both your FAPs in there and your EEO-1 reports, but you could certainly, but you don't need to, and you don't need to certify based on your EEO-1 reports. So that's good news for you. Universities also have flexibilities. Amanda said earlier, universities don't fill out EEO-1s, so they really don't have anything that you could even pull in if you wanted to. But you need to mirror your establishments that you have your AAPs for and the plan structure, and you can always refer to the technical assistance guide that they came out with a year ago. Maybe it's been 2 years now. Time goes so fast. But you could always refer to that, and it'll talk to you about, tell you how to set up your university plans. So good news for FAPs and universities.
Yeah, this was really, I think, some of the biggest information we learned during the webinar from OFCCP. So this is great news.
Yep. And then real quickly on the user levels, there are 2 levels. So the first person who signs in needs to be kind of the overall owner of the plans, the portal, if you will. And then they can go in and you can add other admin users. So an admin user can modify anything. They can change addresses. They can go in and out of any plans or any establishments that they want to. But they can't be deleted. So if you want to delete an admin user, then that's when you have to tell the OFCCP and submit one of those tickets, and then they will take them out of the portal for you. A non-admin user is a little bit different. So they can modify their own establishments. So if I have 10 establishments, I want to put Amanda on as a non-admin user, and I only want her to have access to the one plan that she's responsible for. I just click a button, and that's all she can modify. Now, what we've noticed is that there are, you can see all of the users. And so they can't modify anything, they can't change anything, but they can see all of the other users that are assigned to the entire company. And again, you cannot delete non-admin users, but you can unclick the buttons and they can't do anything.
Yeah, so certainly want to be aware of this before you start assigning folks, giving them access, because there will be a waiting period, right, until OFCCP can kind of help you to remove folks. So that was really informative.
Yep. And then just some considerations. We talked through a lot of these, so we won't spend a lot of time on there. You want to get a list of how many people, who do you want to be your users, either admin or non-users, non-admin. You want to make sure that the main person has a backup, basically. So in case they leave the company, they're on vacation, somebody needs to get in there, you want to just make sure that you have at least 2 admin users assigned to your company. And then a reminder, and we just talked about this as well, non-admin users can see all of the establishments, they can see all of the users, but again, they can't change or modify anything. They can only change or modify the ones they have been given specific access to. And then one FAQ that we thought was very interesting, and we're really curious to see how this goes. So can a user access the contractor portal for companies with different employer EIN numbers? For example, a representative that is accessing the portal on behalf of different companies. So I have a client that files by legal entity. So they file basically EEO reports for 5 different entities. So they have 5 different logins. So if my main contact wants to be able to access all 5 of those companies because she is the main contact, the answer is yes, it's possible. However, each user must have a different registered email address and login.gov account to access the portal. So this could get a little bit cumbersome, and we'll kind of see how this plays out, but it looks like you're going to have different email addresses to get into each one of those companies. So more to come on that, but they say it is possible.
Yeah, I agree, Rosemary. That second sentence, I think I could interpret that more than one way. So it's a little bit confusing. And so we're certainly going to keep our eye on this access and can keep everyone updated along the way. So awesome. Thank you, Rosemary. I'm going to launch us right into some slides around certification. Obviously, we've already talked about it's not time to certify yet, right? You can't even access that section of the portal, but I think it's certainly important to be prepared, and let's start thinking through what that might look like and a few considerations. So one thing that we don't have official documentation on yet is what that certification question is going to look like. You know, what will you be answering to for each of your establishments or FAPs? And what's interesting is OFCCP has released a user guide, but the current user guide does not delve into the certification piece of things. It's a lot more focused on kind of the registration process as well as user assignment. Now, we do have a few user guides from last year when OMB granted approval for this information collection request, right? OFCCP had to go out and gain OMB approval in order to move forward with this portal and the certification process. And so within those old guides, there was a admin specific guide that did delve into what that certification question would be, as well as, there was certainly documentation in the supporting statement that went over to OMB for their approval. So we have a pretty good idea of what this question is going to look like. And so what we have here essentially, and this is just a screenshot from that old user guide that, again, is not up and available on the website. So we assume that they're probably making some modifications, and maybe we'll release some updated information as it gets closer to the actual certification period. It's got a screenshot here, but kind of blew up over here what that question will likely look like. And so essentially at the establishment or the FAP level, what users will be responding to, or if the offer represents that. There are a couple of options. First one is essentially saying, yes, I'm in compliance, right? I have developed and maintain affirmative action programs at each establishment as applicable, probably be slightly reworded to say, at this establishment or functional business unit. The second option is says has been party to a qualifying federal contract or subcontract for 120 days or more, essentially saying I'm required to have an affirmative action plan and program in place, but I have not developed and maintained that program. So essentially, nope, I'm not in compliance. And then the third option is essentially saying, I'm under the jurisdiction of OFCCP. I should have a plan and program, but I'm still within that 120-day period where I'm developing that. So not sure if they will make that an option for those newer contracts to indicate during the time period, or just advise those folks to wait until they are beyond that 120 days period and then go out to certify. But again, just a reminder, I've got that disclaimer at the bottom that this is all from old, outdated materials. So certainly stay tuned for those as they get updated. Now, a couple of things to think about of when you should certify, and the OFCCP webinar was really helpful, I think, in this respect. I know Rosemary and I had a ton of open questions around this, because in our minds, we were thinking about, EEO-1 filings, VET 4212 filings. Typically, you're filing during a certain window of period, but you're referring back to a different time period just to report employee information. So we thought maybe it would be something similar for this certification process. But what OFCCP shared on the webinar is that you will be speaking to present day. So literally the date that you are filling out that certification question for that establishment or that functional or business unit report, you're saying today this report is in compliance. So depending upon what your plan date is, there might be a window that is more strategic to go out there and complete your certification process. So again, the certification process this year is going to be March 31st through the end of June. So if you have a June plan, for example, you're going to start working on your 2022 AAP after June 1st. So it's probably most advantageous to go out there and do your certification prior to June 1st, so you can be speaking to your 2021 plan and program and feel comfortable filling out that question. However, if you have a February 1 plan and you're still in the process of getting everything developed and your program in compliance and feeling good about that, you might not want to go out there right on March 31st and certify. We'd advise that you'd wait until you feel comfortable responding to that certification question, but certainly get out there and do your certification before July 31st, so within that certification window. So obviously we want to emphasize it's really critical to get your plans in place in a timely manner and feel as though your program is in compliance. That's always been important, but now with the certification process, it's even more important to ensure you've got a timeline and you're sticking to it. Anything you'd add to that, Rosemary?
Nope, I just reemphasize, get your plans done. I think it's really critical now.
Absolutely. Okay, and we touched on this a little bit at the beginning. Rosemary spoke to this, but just want to reiterate, that certification will be tied to audit selection. And it was a part of kind of what the GAO was speaking to. They didn't feel like OFCCP was really being strategic in targeting and auditing I shouldn't say targeting, but really in auditing the right establishments or functional plans. And so for the methodology that goes into the federal contractor selection system that develops those corporate scheduling announcement lists and really outlines which establishments or FAPs are going to be audited, that methodology will now take into consideration certification. And so, whether you certify or not, that will be a part of that algorithm. Just because you get out there and you do your certification on an annual basis, it doesn't mean that you are exempt from audits, but certainly could help in reducing the likelihood that you will be audited. So just something to keep in mind there. One big kind of open question that we have that we want to point back to some old materials is how easy or difficult is it going to be to close out records? So an establishment record in the portal or a functional or business unit record. And so on the webinar, OFCCP did indicate that assistance would be needed if there was kind of these major company changes like mergers, acquisitions, spinoffs that folks would need to be reaching out through that technical support form to engage with OFCCP. What we're not so sure about is a more standard establishment or FAP record closure. So if you import your 2018 AAPs and 12 of those establishments are no longer active, so you obviously don't want to certify with them, are you going to have to engage with OFCCP, or can you just mark them closed or not? If we look to an old user guide, that would indicate to us, and we've done so through the screenshot, that there would just be a button you click to indicate that the facility is closed as opposed to open, and then you could move forward with that in your process. And there was even a reference to bulk closures, meaning you could select multiple establishments at once to kind of indicate that they are closed. So I think that's going to be a critical piece of information if you had a lot of establishment changes between 2018 and present day. I think this is important to take into consideration. And one reason why you might not want to kind of certify or not certify, excuse me, register immediately, you might want to hang back. Let's get some more information from OFCCP so you know whether or not you want to check that known identifiers box or not. So just something to keep in mind. With that, let's just kind of continue. I think the considerations of how to register and move forward. I'll turn it over to Rosemary for some important.
Great, and we've got a few more slides, so bear with us. We're running a little bit long, but we knew we would on this because it is such important information. So one of the things that you want to think about, you really need to think about what's going on in your company, what's gone on from 2018 to present. So has your company gone under substantial changes, complete restructures, maybe COVID, you laid off a lot of people, so you're half the size as you were. So you want to think about those things before you simply put in all of the information on the user authorization. Have you gone through mergers and acquisitions? Amanda alluded to this. If you are a completely different company, again, you just want to think about, do I want them to pre-populate those 2018 reports or not? Do all of your companies, your establishments within your companies have federal contracts? So if you have, 100 locations and 30 of them don't have federal contracts, you may not want to upload your 2018 EEO1 report. You might want to manually fill it in so it is only restricted to those establishments that have federal contracts. If you're registering for multiple companies, the example I gave about having multiple legal entities and multiple EEO1s, you just want to think through that process because that's going to be a little bit cumbersome for you. That uploading your EEO1 reports can be fabulous because it's going to save you a ton of work, but it can also be a hindrance if you've got a ton of changes and then you have to go and close and you have to restructure everything within the portal. So you just want to think about that. So if you are using functional affirmative action plans, if they're not reflected in your EEO1 reports, which they probably aren't because EEO1s are by establishment, you're probably not going to want to upload those EEO1 reports. And then if you're a college or university and you don't even file them, obviously you're going to want to check that button. So think through these questions before you get in there and before you start clicking boxes or filling in information, so that you don't have to go back and restructure things once you're in there. So we have a lot of outstanding questions actually. They're probably tired of us, but we've been submitting questions a lot to the OFCCP. So we'll see how they come back. But we're curious, what is the certification period 2023 and beyond? Is it going to be more coinciding with the EEO1 reports? I think that was probably the intent this year, and then they delayed the EEO1 reports. So, what is the certification? Is it going to be that many months, or is it just going to be closed to a window of 1 or 2 months? So we'll find out what that is. What happens with FAPS if you accidentally imported your EEO1 reports? You want to think about that. Do I want to go in and have them reset the portal somehow, or do I want to go in and close all of my EEO1 reports and start over? So just something to think about. And then if you were two separate companies and are now merged, so how does that process work? So could you both companies go out and register on the portal and get their portals set up, and then you call the OFCCP and say, hey, put these two portals together? Maybe. Or should you be doing nothing until the OFCCP comes out with more guidance and says, here's how to do it, or leave them blank and then call the OFCCP and say, okay, here's my company numbers for both of these locations. Can you put them together and then set it up? Kind of up to you, but it's an outstanding question. And then how do you address the establishments that don't fall under OFCCP jurisdiction? You could, if you make the mistake and you upload all those EEO1 reports, you just want to be really careful that those are the establishments that are not under federal jurisdiction, that you do something with them. And then what happens if you don't register and or certify? I think we probably covered that. You're probably going to be bumped up just a little bit higher in that methodology, and you're probably going to get an audit sooner than if you certify. Couple of registration reminders. Again, we've talked through all of this. You want to make sure that you think about all those changes that have come up since 2018. Do I check the box or do I not check the box? That's really the key question here. You're going to have to get a bunch of information together for you. So again, you're thinking about what's going on with my company. And you're going to need your EIN number. You're going to need company numbers. You're going to need establishment information. You're going to need to know who your users are. Again, you can set up users anytime, so you don't feel like you have to do it right away, but you need to have a list so that you'll have it with you. And then make sure you name your establishments in a meaningful way, or it's just going to be a little bit more difficult for you. And then on the OFCCP website, there's some resources for you. There's the user guide that Amanda and I've been kind of referring to. There's FAQs. They're updating these FAQs all the time. So I'd go in there quite frequently to look for anything new. And then despite what it says on the website, it says how-to videos coming soon, but there are 3 videos out there. And they're short. They're like 3 minutes each, really easy to listen to. I'd encourage you to do that. And then they are going to be uploading their webinar that they presented the other day, but it's not out there just yet. So give them some time, because it was a really good one. Both Amanda and I were really impressed by what we heard. They gave us more information than we thought they would. So look for that if it's out there and you missed it. So let me turn it back over to Amanda.
Awesome. Thank you, Rosemary. And we just wanted to wrap up with some DCI resources, but don't want to take any more of folks' precious time. And you will receive with a copy of these slides as well as the recording. So I'll just kind of flip through those real quick, but you'll have them for reference. And then I just want to remind you all that you can submit questions, even after the fact, to news@dciconsult.com. So please do so if you have questions. And otherwise, we really appreciate you joining us, and we'll certainly keep you posted through our blog and other things as we learn more. And then I think I'll turn it back to Amanda, who has some more information to share. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to our speakers for that fantastic presentation. Before we end the session, we are launching a quick poll. Please let us know if you are interested in having a conversation with the DCI sales team. Additionally, we will be sending a follow-up email with more resources and a link to the ongoing webinar schedule. Thank you for joining, and we hope to see you again soon.